You're listening to Two in a Bar. Hello, and welcome to the first Two in a Bar podcast. I'm Chris.
I'm Joe.
And we're going to be chatting about all sorts of music-related topics. This first episode is just a short introduction to the podcast where we're going to be explaining a bit about who we are, what we're going to be doing, what you can expect in the podcast. So feel free to skip this and jump into some of the more juicy musical topics later on. But that's...
I wish we could skip it because we're already on take 2, aren't we?
We are, to be fair. So, who are you, Joe?
As in, who am I to be talking about music?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And I imagine that later down the line, people will still be asking themselves this very question. So I have been in music all my life, as I'm sure many have, many listeners, many others as well.
Yeah.
And I, as you know, Chris, studied music at the University of Nottingham.
We both did together.
You know, maybe we could say the genesis of the podcast started then.
10 years ago.
We could. Crikey, it's been 10 years, hasn't it? Yeah, since then I do lots of music because I'm a primary school teacher. That's about it, really. I love it. I'm much more of a layman in terms of, you know, I'm sure you'll tell us about yourself in a moment.
I think that's very modest. You've got grade 8 in a number of instruments.
Well, you know.
I would say you're quite good at pretty much most things to do with music. And I'm looking for a phrase to describe you that's not jack of all trades, master of none.
Which is worrying because that's probably quite accurate, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it probably is. Let's leave it at that for now.
Okay.
Because I'm okay with that. Go on, tell us about you.
Okay, so my main instrument is the flute, but I make my living doing conducting orchestras, and I also teach the flute, piano, and a bit of music theory from time to time.
You're more the expert, aren't you?
This is the thing, on certain niche things, whereas maybe in general,
you're very good. You're also, you've rather modestly left out your LRSM on the flute, haven't you?
Oh, yeah, throw that in there.
You know, let's get that. Let's just put all the cards on the table nice and early so people know what they're dealing with.
That's it, absolutely. So this podcast, what are we going to be doing?
We've got a number of topics, haven't we, that we'd like to discuss. Maybe we could get a few suggestions as well. You never know.
On that note, just to interrupt, I know we've had this conversation before, but I can't stress enough that for the first 100 episodes, there will be nobody listening. It's going to take time for anybody to find it and listen to it.
So if anybody now is listening to this, you know, what are you in? Some kind of parallel universe?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. I mean, like, I'll have a listen just to make sure it's uploaded okay.
Get the numbers up a bit. You know.
You might. My girlfriend, my mum, maybe. What about you?
That's nice. My girlfriend definitely won't. My mum doesn't know we're doing it. So, you know, I rather suspect my dad will be a big fan.
Very good musician, your dad.
Very, very good musician, my dad. So imagine this sort of two youngish upstarts, talking about music in a way that he would deem to be quite prosaic. I imagine that's the sort of thing that he would love.
But going back to what we're going to be covering in the podcast and why we're doing it, I think for me, I just like talking about music. As I know, do you? And
absolutely.
The prospect of doing this, and one of the things we wanted to do was just meet once a week, have a chat about something to do with music over a beer. So that's going to be one of the key things about this. Chat over a beer. Have you got a beer?
I've got a Guinness.
Other beers are available.
Oh yes, I'm so sorry. I've got sort of a rather popular stout, which I think is generally brewed in Dublin at a particular brewery there, but I won't name it. How's that?
That sounds good.
Good. Yeah, don't worry, this is great.
Okay, so the kinds of topics we're going to be talking about, as we've already said, it's going to be a range of things. So there will be some music history, talking about specific composers, specific pieces, maybe a little bit of light analysis, nothing heavy going.
It certainly will be light, won't it?
It will. It very much will. And just chatting general topics about what it's like to play in an orchestra, for instance, which I'm sure there'll be lots of people who can relate to, or maybe curious about if they don't.
So things like singing in a choir as well. The best things about that. Worst things. Should you do it if you've not done it before? That sort of thing.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody who's expecting an academic style lecture?
Welcome.
but actually,
yeah, I would suggest, probably not the one for you. One of the reasons I wanted to do it is because I would suggest maybe there's a little bit of a stigma around classical music, because, as we know, we'll probably get into this sort of thing at some point. Most people who end up liking classical music do it because they've learned, let's say, an instrument, which is typically in an orchestra. And in order to do that, they need to have had money for lessons, etc. And so I think it attracts a certain type of person, which, I very much include ourselves in that.
Mm-hmm.
But perhaps because of that, the world of classical music can be incredibly intimidating and seem a little bit inaccessible. And hopefully, with us just sort of chatting over a beer, maybe we can try and sort of push that door slightly more ajar and show how interesting and great it can be.
And if there were a podcast with two people, just two random people I didn't know, who were talking about these kinds of things, I would love that. I would genuinely want to listen to it. So that's another one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, because I couldn't really find any of this kind of content. So I thought, I would listen to this. I wouldn't listen to myself, but somebody else talking about these kinds of things. So hopefully there'll be other people who would want a similar thing, because there's a lot of...
That's the hope. It's not just Chris's mum and his girlfriend.
Although they are the core listenership, for sure. But there's a lot of academic, quite dry, would that be fair to say, content, which, if that's what you're looking for, then that's absolutely ideal. If you're looking for to be informed,
I think that's important to say, isn't it, in terms of we're not trying to criticize that, because I think a lot of classical music analysis like that is utterly fascinating, incredibly interesting, but then, as you said, also at a very different level. And absolutely, if that's what you're into, go and listen to some of them, because they're fantastic.
For sure. What would you say to somebody who's expecting a polished, professional kind of quality, kind of standard of podcast straight away?
I'll probably just whatever device listening to, go throw it in the nearest river. I mean, no, I'm joking. I'm sure we will get better as the episodes progress.
This is absolutely, and this is off on a tangent already. First of many tangents.
Yeah, enjoy it.
One thing I'm trying to get better at in general, not necessarily to do with music, although it applies to a lot of musical things, is I'm quite a perfectionist. Maybe it comes from, you polish up a piece to perform.
Yeah.
And with something like this, it's infinitely better to just get started and not try and make the first thing amazingly good, because, like I say, no one's going to listen to it anyway, and then you just learn whilst doing it, like from doing it a lot.
It's a little bit like, when they say about if you've never exercised before and you want to start doing it, you're not going to run a 5K in 20 minutes, are you? Get out there and do a bit, and it will be rubbish to begin with, and get going like that, get your consistency up. Very much the same,
Yeah. So the other reason I thought it would be good to do this is, as you know, during lockdown, I started making electronic dance music remixes of well-known classical pieces.
I do know. Big fan.
Thanks, mate.
Check out Chris Justin.
That's it. If you're listening on YouTube, then you're already in the right place. If not, that's Chris Justin. Chris Justin Music on YouTube, Chris Justin on Spotify, Apple, etc., etc. And the thing is, I really, really enjoy making content and putting it out. But those tracks, believe it or not, this might come as a shock to some people, they take ages to do. And like now, lockdown is, touch wood, thankfully for the moment, over.
Yeah.
I've actually got to go and conduct orchestras and stuff again. So I can't get new stuff out that much. And like the most I can get out is one a month, realistically, whilst I've got conducting. So I just wanted some other kind of content to fill in the gaps in the meantime, put something out a bit more regularly, because thankfully people have subscribed to my channel, which is very nice. And then I feel bad only putting something out once a month.
and now they'll get much more. Hopefully much more gold. Hopefully it won't bring down the level of your music.
I'm just laughing because you're saying that. But we're recording this where I can see the video. Obviously, it's a podcast, so it's audio only. I can just see you there with a plate of cheese tucking into it with a fork.
Don't let them in behind the curtain already. This is a bloody good plate of cheese, though.
Okay.
Oh,
little bits of info. When will be podcast day, Joe?
I was under the impression it would be Sunday.
You don't even know, do you?
I'm not sure.
Okay, so the podcast is going to be going out Wednesday mornings.
Wednesday morning was my next guess.
Wednesday's podcast day. All right, thanks for joining us. Come back next week where we'll be talking about our worst 5 musical moments. That's things that have happened to us when we've been performing a concert or rehearsing. Just crazy things that have happened.
Looking forward to it.
Just to reiterate, what day is podcast day, Joe?
Podcast day is Wednesday.
That's right.
What else would it be?
We'll see you then.
See you then.